from Chicago. This is Big Ten Today, presented by Rally House. Mike Hall alongside Anthony Herron. Tons of football on the way, but how about that matchup tomorrow in volleyball? A top 10 matchup with Purdue and Penn State. One of two top 20 matchups on the air. I know you love volleyball.
I do.
It's pretty special right
And I
now.
love Dave Shondell, too. I love
great.
talking to him every time we have him on the radio show. He's always fun. He's always great. He's willing to talk about every sport under the sun as well. And there's a family lineage. You know, there's a legacy there with the Colvin family, from football to basketball, volleyball. They've done a lot in West Lafayette over the years.
He's going to join us about 25 minutes or so to look ahead to that volleyball scene. Football will be the main focus of the show, which is why we bring in Ross Jellinger of Yahoo Sports. And Ross is joining us, by the way, Anthony, after having a really boring last 24 hours.
No college football news to talk about.
No news, right, Ross?
No news at all. No, a couple of leagues aren't just rearranging the chairs, on their respective boats, and one boat might sink completely. So, yeah, nothing going on at all. All quiet here.
Yeah, we'll see if there's any development in the course of this show. Never know based on the world we live in right now. However, we start things off with our big story presented by Rally House. There are Big Ten teams ranked in the latest AP poll, 3 of them in the top 10. Michigan just beat USC, so they're now on top of them, one right after another. Look at number 19, the Fighting Illini. You know they have Sand, Illinois. Another week that they are ranked. So, since some of these teams are now 1/3 of the way through this season, let's talk about them. And let's go top to bottom, starting with Ohio State, number 3 team in the country. Ross, they've had 3 pretty easy non-conference games, 3 easy wins. So far, what have you learned about the Buckeyes?
Well, we've learned that they're really talented, right? Which we, of course, knew that. If Ohio State had won every game by 50 points, I'm sure people would have expected them to win by 60. And they almost have won every game by 50 points, right? 46 against Akron and 56 against Western Michigan and 35 against Marshall. It feels like the talent pieces are doing exactly what we all expected them to do, right? Will Howard has been incredibly accurate at quarterback, 70% completions. He takes care of the football, right? 1 interception so far this year. And he can be at times prolific. I wouldn't call him prolific in general, but when he needs to be, right, they can move the ball. But we haven't seen them really pressured yet, and really him pressured yet. I'm sure that'll come soon enough. We saw Quinshon Judkins, obviously, this last game have an incredible day. Those are the kind of things that make it probably worth getting him, right, bringing him from Ole Miss in. And so we've seen that backfield of Judkins and Henderson. I think they're averaging right around 9 yards a carry. And then the receivers, right? Jeremiah Smith, the freshman, Egbuka, right? We've seen him go off in a couple of games. So all the pieces seem to be there. The thing is, guys, we just, Anthony, we haven't really seen them pushed or pressured in any way just yet.
Not yet, Ross. Not yet. There's no doubt about that, man. I do like the sort of business-like focus that Ohio State has taken to the games so far. And every team's going to have multiple bye weeks, so they got an early bye that's already baked into the way that they're operating. But then they come out of the bye and still look fluid, still look fresh, still look focused. And, for a team with all the expectations that they have in Columbus, then at times maybe that focus can wane. Maybe that confidence can get a bit outsized and have you not as locked in for an individual game as you would like them to be. But we do see schematically their sound in execution. There's not a position group that you think maybe going into that position room, maybe Ryan Day has a little bit of extra focus because he's not sure about the defensive front or about the running back room or about how the O-line is performing. Everyone, while maybe not at their peak through the first month of the season, is performing at a high level. You see, like Ross is talking about, all that physical ability that's there. And whatever they've tried to accomplish so far, whatever they've thrown at the opponent, they've executed at a really high level.
Yeah, they have conference play starting next, done with non-conference play, which is actually great news. Ryan Day's record against Big Ten opponents, he's only lost to one team.
Yeah.
Now, he's lost to them 3 years in a row. One team is Michigan, but
it's kind of a big deal.
39-3
one of them.
as a Big Ten conference head coach for Ryan Day. Oregon's the next team on that list. And Ross, they had an interesting non-conference slate. 2 pretty close, scary wins for them, and then 1 comfortable win in their big rivalry game against Oregon State.
A little bit different of a situation when you look at Oregon and Ohio State, as you mentioned there. Well, we've seen Oregon struggle a little bit, especially at a really key part of a team. We've discussed this before, but it's that offensive line, and the Ducks took a while to kind of find the right combination on the offensive line. The first couple of games, they were switching and swapping. You don't often see a team use 6 different combinations on the O-line, but that's what happened, and they had to find the right one. Maybe they have. They were a little more cohesive. They certainly looked a lot better against Oregon State. So they appear to have everything else, right? For the most part, the defense is playing pretty well, except maybe the game against Boise. But Boise also has a running back that will probably be a Heisman finalist. Ashton Jeanty will give a lot of teams a lot of trouble. Offensively, Dylan Gabriel, 6 TDs, 0 interceptions. Been pretty dang good. They've been explosive at times. The first game, they had a little hiccups in getting into the end zone and converting some of those red zone trips. But we've seen basically what we expected, except that O-line, which it now seems to be they've taken a big forward step there.
And that defensive front, I did have my eyes on them against their in-state rival because the Beavs like to run the football. There's only 2 plays of 10 yards or more that Oregon State was able to get on the ground against the Ducks. That, to me, is a big deal as they're getting ready to approach Big Ten play, because when you face one physical team and you saw the success, like Ross was talking about, that Boise State was able to have against them on the ground, then a lot of other teams are going to see that same execution on film. And not everyone has an Ashton Jeanty available to them.
You love him.
I do, man. I mean, he's going to be, like Ross was talking about, a Heisman finalist. If there was a vote to be had right now, he would get mine. But a lot of season left to play. And even though they don't have him as a back, a lot of teams in the Big Ten do want to run the football. They do want to have that be the focal point of their offense. And so when you put something on film that other folks say, hey, maybe we can exploit that, then they're going to get into the game and they're going to try to exploit that. So it is important for the Ducks to have that on film, especially that second half on each line of scrimmage. The way they kept Dylan Gabriel clean in half number 2, the explosion returned to the quarterback position in Eugene, and the defense was able to be stifling against the Beavers. That matters a lot. And so we'll see how it plays out moving forward, but at least what's on film right now, we've seen at least one half, and you can make a case over a half of football that looked like the Ducks we expected.
They start conference play this weekend as well. One of my favorite idiosyncrasies about this year's schedule is their first ever game as a conference member in their new conference will be against UCLA. Their longtime conference buddy in the Pac-12. Let's turn our attention to Penn State now, Ross. They're coming off, statistically speaking, just about as dominant a performance as you will ever see a college football team have in their win against Kent State.
Yeah, I think it was statistically, I believe there was the difference in the total yardage between one team and another was the biggest difference in Penn State history, and one of the biggest differences in yardage that we've seen historically in college football. I think it was over 650 yards. So Penn State had over 700, and I think Kent State barely got to 100 maybe or so. So it was pretty incredible beatdown. But you wonder what Penn State we're going to get, right? The one that did that to Kent State, or the one that routed kind of West Virginia on the road in Morgantown, or the one that struggled against Bowling Green. Now, Bowling Green might, at the end of the season, be an 8-9 win team and competing for the MAC title. They certainly have some players that are power conference guys, including the tight end there, and he caused some trouble for Penn State. But which one are we gonna get? As we've seen Penn State again play in stretches really, really well and then struggle. But it's pretty clear that Penn State's offense is different in a good way with Andy Kotelnicki at offensive coordinator. Drew Aller is having one of the better years, right, that we've seen from him, and they're one of the nation's best. You look, Anthony, at red zone, 14 trips, I believe, in the red zone for Penn State, 12 touchdowns. I think that leads the nation, or very close to leading a nation, and leading the nation. It's certainly an important stat moving forward. And then throw in Nick Singleton, right, at running back, he's averaging 9 yards a pop. So overall, I guess about what we expected. Some would say the Bowling Green game was a little tighter, but it's what we thought we would get from the Andy Kotelnicki show there in Happy Valley.
And there was that hope that was tied into it, but at least like with the previous regime, we've seen Nick Singleton looked like this before. We've seen Katron Allen look like this before. You go back 2 years and how explosive both those guys were. With the run game with Drew Aller, we saw him look good, look competent, protect the football last season. But now those physical attributes that made him a 5-star quarterback when he came out of high school, now we're seeing that in legitimate production. He is one of the most combustible quarterbacks in college football up to this point in the season, with the way he can complete the deep ball, with the way his legs can keep the opposing defense off balance. And he's this big, statuesque figure in the pocket and on the move. And he's also got this acumen to the passing game, throwing with anticipation and accuracy like we haven't seen him throw with before. Frankly, didn't even see him look like this in high school. Like, I evaluated his high school film when he was coming out preparing to play in the All-American Bowl. He was a bit erratic at that level also. So now you're seeing sort of every aspect of the game of Drew Aller really come to the fore, and you got to give Andy Kotelnicki a lot of credit for that, for the continued development of this exceptional talent as a quarterback. And so when you've got a difference maker at that position and all the talent that surrounds him, and yeah, there was that one game against Bowling Green where you could say the defense showed some leaks and had some concerns there. I think most of us feel like this should be another really dominant Penn State defense. They got back to that form as well. They're as formidable in what they can bring to the table as any team in the country.
Going to be an awesome game when they play Illinois this weekend. And remember, the last time Illinois went to Beaver Stadium, Penn State was also ranked in the top 10. Illinois won.
It didn't end yet, right? Like, isn't that game? I think that game is still going.
9 overtimes in that game, and the Illini pulled off a top 10.
I don't think that's accurate.
We'll touch on the Illini coming up in just a second. Big opportunity this past weekend for Michigan taking on USC. We saw them have an opportunity against Texas. They did not look very good. Sure enough, Ross, with 2 minutes left, USC has the lead, but the Wolverines did not give up and pulled out a clutch victory.
Yeah, I mean, has there been any team in the country, right, that so far that has had such a humbling loss at home, blowout to Texas, where you're kind of manhandled, and then a resounding victory against a ranked team at home where you manhandled them, right? And that's what happened late there. We saw Michigan's drive marching down the field, using that offensive line and that running game to push the ball all the way down the field and get it in on that 4th and goal. So exciting. But the two right drastically different outcomes, and I don't know if there's any team in the country with that. So if you look, at Michigan season so far, I think the QB situation probably sticks out the most, right? Alex Orji takes over at quarterback. Most thought he would win the job originally. He did not. But now they've got him at quarterback. And you wonder, Anthony, if you might start seeing Michigan, maybe using this bye week, I think they're off this week, to really build an offensive game plan. I'm sure they already have one, but to maybe install more things that built around Orji's strengths as a runner. It reminds me of like Urban Meyer when he used Tim Tebow down at Florida. You would think that we'll see some of those packages maybe coming to Ann Arbor.
And I was really pleased to see that you got double-digit carries from Alex Orji in this game. So game plan-wise, I like that the offense did seem to begin to just sort of try to cater to the skills that he brings to the table, Ross. And probably one of the fun storylines out of the team who's a defending national champion. So there's always going to be big expectations in Ann Arbor. But then you have Khalil Mullings and what he's been able to do. 2 100-yard games in a row the last couple of weeks here, and just one of the more spectacular runs that you will see to be able to ice the game against USC, where he's just got Trojans hanging all over him, and he's continuing to drive his legs and churn his power through that defense. And when you watch this run, I'd love to see this in slow motion at one point. There are a few sports that look as good in slow motion as football do, and that particular run will go down in Michigan lore for what it meant at that point in the game. So now you have that guy. I've asked you this a couple of weeks in a row now. Can Khalil Mullings be a guy who can be an elite level runner and be a championship level runner for Michigan when you compare him and pair him with Donovan Edwards? And right now, the answer's starting to look like yes.
Yeah, play of the season for them, for sure. That set up their eventual game-winning score. Remember, they've won 26 straight Big Ten Conference games at this point. The team they beat, Ross, USC, man, that's a tough plane ride home for them.
A tough and a long one, and it's interesting. I just said, has there been any team in the country with a loss and a win like Michigan's had? USC's kind of had that too, right? They opened the season in a neutral field in Las Vegas, and they beat a top 15, top 10 LSU team, an incredible high, right? We're all writing in the media about the defense is fixed and USC is back and all this stuff, and then boom, right? They go to the big house. Sloppy first half performance offensively. Defense wasn't terrible, but just couldn't move the ball enough offensively. Didn't probably give the D enough of a break. And in the end, the D broke, right? And we saw that just now on those clips. So there's definitely some concern in the consistency with Miller Moss in USC's offense, right? We saw the first and third quarters against LSU. Real struggle in moving the football. And then the first half, of course, against Michigan. So to me, that's kind of the summation there of USC's first few games.
And I know you've written a lot about the expanded college football playoff, Ross, and so that to me is something that Trojans fans can take solace in because it is one loss, but in the 12-team playoff era, it's not nearly as damaging, as disheartening to a team, to a fan base. When you're thinking about championship potential, it'll be there, not only in the Big Ten, but from a national perspective. And what I did like was the response in the second half because USC got that championship haymaker from Michigan throughout the first half of that game. It's one of the questions I had about the Wolverines, whether or not that DNA was still within them, from what they lost last season. Not just the production, but the leadership. USC took that swing, took it on the chin, and then responded in half number 2. Came back and took the lead in that game. Weren't able to hold on to it, but when you look at the response throughout the third quarter and much of the fourth, that was a USC team that you say they can go into a stadium as hostile as the Big House and respond like that to the defending national champs. I think there's a lot of positives to take from what they did.
Again, they got a tough schedule coming up. Wisconsin up next, then on the road Minnesota, then Penn State to open up this first half of their season. Before we go on this topic, Ross, quick thoughts on the Fighting Illini after their win on the road against a ranked Nebraska team.
Comeback kids, right? Down by 4 at home to Kansas, about 10 minutes left. Came back to win down on the road in Nebraska by a touchdown with about 11 minutes left. Came back to win. Brett Bielema has a resilient group and in one of the country's best defensive units. I know we've talked week in and week out about how impressive the Illinois defense has been, but Altmaier at quarterback, just so consistent. At some point in the Nebraska game, I think it was like 20 of 24 or 19 of 21, something like that. It was incredible. And they're second nationally in turnover margin. They've lost 3 and gained 10 turnovers. The defense has forced 3 fumbles and picked off, I think, 7 passes. So that's got to continue, right? And I'm sure Brett Bielema would take a few turnovers there in Happy Valley.
And I'd say amongst the best signs for what the Illini have done so far this season, Ross, because coming into the season, if you told me Aaron Henry in his second year running the Illinois defense, they're going to be a lot better on that side of the football. They're going to take the football away. They're going to sack the quarterback. I'd have said, you know what? I dig that. I get that. And I can expect that because of what they've been on defense in the time Brett Bielema has been there for the most part. If you told me the run game wasn't necessarily going to get out of second gear, that they would pass the ball in the level to the extent that they have, I'd say, wow, that's a really good sign for the Illini. The way Luke Altmaier's played so far this season, if he can keep this up, not only efficiency, but explosion. I mean, firing the ball down the field to Bryant and Franklin and Elsie. He's got weapons on the outside. He's using them really well.
Barry Lunny, some nice play calls, too.
Yeah, no doubt.
The offensive coordinator for Illinois. By the way, as we go, the AP poll does not go to 27. It only goes to 25. But if it did, we'd be talking about Indiana. And if they get a win this weekend in conference play, I think there's a pretty good chance we will see the Hoosiers as a ranked squad this time next week. Here's a look at your updated Big Ten standings. As like I said, we're basically a third of the way through the season for most of the teams in conference play. And when you take a big picture look and step back, some of these things you expected, some things perhaps you didn't. So we're going to talk about our biggest surprises 4 weeks into this season. It can be a team, it can be a player, it can be a trend. Ross, overall, give me one of your big surprises thus far this season.
Well, Indiana's offense, right? Let me give you some statistics here. Indiana's offense, 5th in scoring, 50 points a game, 21st in rushing, 225 yards a game, 23rd in passing, 288 a game, and 11th in total offense, over 500 yards of offense a game. I'm not sure anyone pegged Indiana to be top 25 in all 4 major offensive categories a few games into the year, and top 12 in 2 of those. But Kurt Cignetti, brand new coach, right, came over from JNU, paired with Curtis Rourke. Again, quarterback, came in from Ohio, transfer QB, 8 TDs, 0 INTs. They've just been an offensive machine, and they had no problems going out west and the long trip out to UCLA in the Rose Bowl. And you look at what UCLA with the fits maybe a little bit that UCLA gave LSU in Tiger Stadium, and you maybe think, hey, this Indiana team could be really, really good. And the schedule sets up, I think in our preview show back in August, I mentioned the schedule for this team sets up really nicely. They could be 6-0 heading into a game with Nebraska in I think the second week of October.
Of all those stats you brought up, my favorite stat so far about Indiana's offense, last year their punter averaged more than 5 punts per game. He doesn't have 5 punts total on the year this year, only 4 punts for him. Give me your biggest surprise so far.
Well, and I mean, to Ross's point as well about the offense, they protect the quarterback at a really high level. That offensive line for the Hoosiers doing some great things. East Lansing, their offensive line, we weren't sure exactly what to expect from Michigan State, but the team as a whole just looks much further along a month into the time that Jonathan Smith has been there than really would have been expected. And, of course, their quarterback, Aiden Childs, yes, he looks like a first-year starter because he'll turn the football over on occasion. They had a game that they probably should have won the other night if it weren't for some of the weather conditions with some sort of slick football-type fumbles that are happening on the road against Boston College. Well, so we'd be talking about a 4-0 Michigan State football team. That's the level of play they've gotten from quarterback, a run game that they've begun to sort of manufacture with that zone rushing scheme. It's gotten better and better each week so far this season. And Joe Rossi has come in, running that defense, getting takeaways, stopping the run, able to sack the quarterback without sort of this, this remarkable blitz package that we've come accustomed to seeing in East Lansing over the years. There's a Michigan State at 3-1, looking like a threat. If they get healthy anytime soon at wide receiver, now in conference play, in the thick of that, there's some opponents who are really going to have to see Michigan State as a formidable squad.
Yeah, 4 points on the road to an ACC team away from being 4-0 to start off a brand new coach's tenure. Ross, one more surprise so far this year from you.
Well, I don't know if this is a huge surprise, right? Because a lot of people picked Rutgers as their real big kind of surprise team, right? And so I don't know that they've surprised, but we certainly see Rutgers live up to that kind of billing. And they've done it without arguably their best defensive player, right? We saw Mo Torre, the linebacker, go out for the year in preseason camp with a torn ACL, and that just hasn't really seemed to slow them down too much, right? Right now they've seems to have one of the better defensive units in the country. They're aggressive, they tackle well, things that we've come to learn, right, with Greg Schiano squads. And you look at the game against Virginia Tech, right? They were pushed really kind of first time this year, pushed really hard, and they got a big turnover, right, to end the game late. Robert Longerbeam, I believe, picked off a pass with around 2 minutes or so left. And they forced multiple 3-and-outs in that game, turnover on downs. They got a couple more turnovers and interception. They really lean on this defense and of course, that run game. But it's been impressive to see. So maybe not a shocker, but Rutgers may, quote, surprise some people this year.
Yeah, 3-0 once again for that program. That's 4 years consecutively they've started the year winning their first 3 games. One more surprise from you, Anthony.
Well, I think for a lot of folks, they were curious about, it's one thing for Billy Edwards to be the starter in College Park, and that's not necessarily the most shocking thing, but up to this point in his career, before this season, he had been seen as this runner, sort of a short yardage fullback type that would take some of the impact when Talia Tagovailoa wasn't needing to be the guy handling the QB run game. But the way that Billy Edwards is not throwing, but passing the football, the finesse that he can put on the ball at times, the way he can turn the ball over, the nose of the football, turn that over in a rapid manner to fit it over a linebacker in front of a safety, the anticipation that he throws it with, to be able to fit it into a tight window where you're on that outside hole shot where you got a corner who's trying to play in the back pocket of the receiver and the safety is starting to converge, and he can just get the football out of his hands and rifle it in there in times when he needs to. And yes, also still showing some of the durability and the rugged nature as a runner. Also, the team has been ready for this moment for Billy Edwards for a couple of years now. They are so pleased and happy with the way he's performing. He's got one of the top receivers in college football on the outside, and Ty Felton as well. And for Billy Edwards, I'm happy to see the level of play from him, because as much as I'm all for the opportunity for players to transfer, to pursue what they want to do with the portal, I do respect the patience that Billy Edwards has shown here to wait for this opportunity. And now that he's got it, he has snatched it. He is seizing it every time he takes the football field. In the game this weekend between the Terps and the Hoosiers, the level of quarterback play and offense we're going to see there may be the most fun game we watch this weekend.
I think a lot of people would argue Taulia Tagovailoa was the greatest quarterback in Maryland history. At least statistically, there's plenty of arguments on that side. Right now, Edwards has more yards per game this year than Taulia did last year, and a higher completion percentage this year than Taulia did last year. It's amazing to follow up a talent like that with the season Edwards has had. Like I mentioned, we're going to go away from football for a second. A mammoth volleyball match is on the way tomorrow. Purdue and Penn State in a top 10 battle. To talk about it, the Boilermaker head coach, Dave Shondell, joins us next. Well, Purdue volleyball currently sits number 10 in the country. Just wrapped up non-conference play over the weekend. 9-2 is their record, undefeated at home. Got a top 10 win under their belt with a takedown of Kentucky a couple weeks back. And the beginning of a massively anticipated Big Ten conference season starts for them Wednesday versus top 5 ranked Penn State. We are lucky enough to have their head coach here for our big interview. It is Purdue's Dave Schondell. And over the weekend, Dave, you had some real challenges, couple of top 10 opponents in Creighton and Kansas. What did you guys learn as a team through those matches?
Mostly the Kansas and Creighton were really good. And on the road, we played at Kansas, and they had a great crowd in their gym. And then Creighton showed up with about 500 people for our match with them, even though it was supposed to be on a neutral floor. It felt like we were playing in Omaha. But two really good teams, and where I felt like we played maybe a B performance against Kansas, I thought we played awfully well against Creighton. They were just better than we were, and both those matches, Mike, could have gone either way. A lot of 2-point games, and we just couldn't find a way to win them. But we have to serve the ball tougher. We have to find ways to get a little more offense and put some balls away when we need to. But overall, it was nothing that surprised me. We just ran into a couple of pretty good teams.
You mentioned the attendance there. That's where I want to go next. I got to see you a couple weeks back on Tailgate, and we talked on the show about the sport sort of exploding. And you mentioned that there's going to be a couple times this year when you guys are playing in Mackey Arena. Indiana in 3 weeks, Wisconsin the week after that. That's 14,000 fans that are going to be watching the Boilermakers play a live volleyball match on campus. Let me ask you, how did that first come to be? When did those talks first begin?
Well, first it's 14,800.
I shortchanged you.
Yeah, we don't want to lose those 800 people anywhere. But we've played some matches in Mackey before. It's such an unbelievable venue to play in. As you know, Mike, I'm a huge basketball fan. I watch both Katie Gerald's squad and Matt Painter's squad play all the time in Mackey Arena, and it is an electric venue. And so we felt like with the excitement behind our sport right now, with what's happened at some other Big Ten universities, and with the love that our fans have for this particular team at Purdue, I felt like we could get some big crowds. And so I approached our administration probably in the summer and asked them about the opportunity. And there was a lot of conversation, but one of the things that I chuckled about was they said, well, if we don't get 3,500 fans, we can't make any money. And so I said, we'll get 3,500 fans. Okay, that's not going to be an issue. And then just this past week, they announced that it sold out at 14,800. So that's a pretty good thing for our sport, pretty good thing for Purdue volleyball.
It's amazing. I mean, that's basically 7 times the crowd you would normally have for a home match. How will it feel different when you play in there?
Well, I think that it's a bigger venue. We've played at a couple places similar to that this year. Utah where we played a couple weeks ago, is almost the same type of a venue as Mackey Arena. The sidelines are a little bit different, but I just think that if it's the kind of crowd that I'm used to seeing when I go in there and watch Boiler basketball, then all it's going to do is excite our people. We'll come out ready to play. In the past, we've won probably 90% of our matches that we've played in Mackey Arena, so it's not like we're afraid to go in there and play. What you're watching on the screen right now, obviously, is Holloway Gym. Holds about 2,500 people. We love playing in there, but this was a risk that we were willing to take to help. I think a lot of things. I think it helps recruiting for us, that people can see what kind of crowds we can actually generate at Purdue University. When you play in a smaller venue, you're not going to be ranked in the top 15, even though you sell out match after match after match. But this way they can see, wait a minute, that's the biggest crowd. This will be a record for Big Ten volleyball. Between two Big Ten teams, the 14,800 will be a Big Ten record.
Yeah, pretty cool. Between two teams in the Big Ten Conference facing each other, there'd never been a crowd that size. And again, that'll happen in just a few weeks in October. That is, of course, going to all be in conference play. You just wrapped up non-conference play with a 9-2 record. Give me a who or a what that has surprised you thus far this season on your team.
Well, I think that we're bringing back 5 starters from a year ago, and I think that they're playing about as expected. I think Raven Colvin has been the one player that has gone to a new level. Raven had 3 different setters her first 3 years. Now, for the first time, she's had the same setter in back-to-back seasons, and that's Taylor Anderson, who has really improved as a sophomore and is carrying herself with so much more calm on the floor, making great decisions. But Raven had a hard time in the past hitting the ball behind the setter. That's that layup approach, going off one foot. Not a problem this year. She's crushing the ball in front of the setter, behind the setter, no matter where she is. And she's also one of the top blockers in the country. So that level of play has made a big difference. It's taken some of that burden off of our 2 left side hitters, Chloe Chacoin and Eva Hudson, who are maybe one of the best combinations on the left side in the entire country. We're getting better offensive output from our other middle, Lourdes Myers, who's 6'3", but plays like she's 6'5". And then a new player that hasn't played a lot for us is Kenna Woolard. Kenna is out of the state of Illinois, played about half the time last year. Now she's been kind of our staple on the right side. She's fast, she's got a great arm, and she's putting balls away for us on the right side.
You bring up Raven Coleman. Of course, her dad, Roosevelt, was an all-time great football player for Purdue and played in the NFL for a while. He also worked with us for a while. So let me ask you, how much of a stage mom is he as a parent?
He's very active, Mike. I think he's committed to not miss a match this year. I mean, he's been we've been on the road for 3 weekends in a row. Went from Salt Lake City to Dallas, Texas, to Lawrence, Kansas, and he was there for every match. And he's vocal. He loves his kid. He loves his Boilermakers. He's been great for Purdue in every facet, okay? Obviously, Miles, his son, is playing for Matt Painter right now. But I love Roosevelt Colvin, okay? The whole family has been great. And he's very, very positive about what's happening with Purdue University.
I know he's a great ambassador for the school. He's also a really fun guy. So I'm gonna tell him you said he's a full 10 on the stage mom scale, and we'll see what his response is to that. Let's get to your match coming up against Penn State. It's going to be such a great matchup. 2 top 10 programs facing off each other. Give me your initial thoughts on what you know about Penn State.
Well, Penn State's big and physical. And they've won some big matches this year, especially the one over Louisville at home. They smoked Louisville in 3. And so that got everybody's attention when that happened. But they really have 3 new players on their roster this year that, we're trying to get familiar with. One is a setter, Stark, whose dad played at Ball State. I'm really familiar with his dad. He was a great player for Ball State. The mom played at Texas. She's a really good athlete, was one of the top-ranked setters coming out of in this class out of high school. They've got 2 transfers from Nebraska, a right side player, Juravicius, that's got a great arm, and then Mendelson in the middle, who's about 6'5.5". So they got a lot of help, coming in this year after losing some key players from last season. So those people will help them, and they've got 3 fifth-year players. They've got Taylor Trammell, who started her career here, is a tremendous middle blocker, one of the best blockers in America right now. A left side hitter, Merzik, that played at Michigan for 2 years. Great arm, thunders the ball. And then their other player that they have returning, if you give me a second, I'll figure it out, would be the other left side player, Cameron Hanna, who came from Clemson, that hits the ball very, very high, touches almost 11 feet. So very, very athletic, but they're not as much of a veteran team as we were facing last weekend when we faced Kansas and Creighton, who put almost all seniors on the floor. So, they're coming to Holloway Gym. It will be an interesting experience for young players whenever they come and step on the floor on Beeland Court.
We'll be watching Wednesday night, that match on Big Ten Network. When it's happening, tell me something I should be looking for. How will you know if things are going well for your team in that match?
Well, if we can serve them out of system a little bit, and what I'm talking about is, fans often get concerned when you make service errors. But if you serve lollipops over the net, they're going to pass the ball right to the setter. The setter's going to have all of her options, and they're going to run it down your throat. So we have to serve the ball tough, both deep, and maybe mix in some mid-zone short serves against them to take them from where the setter's not making her job really easy and having her choice. We want to make sure they're having to set the ball to certain people so we can get our block set up. So our serving, I think, is going to be a real key in this match. It's something that we've been focused on, we're improving on. But if they're putting every ball right to the setter, it's going to be a tough night for the Boilermakers.
Dave Shondell, head coach of Purdue. Always great talking to you, man. Best of luck in Wednesday's match.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate you. Boiler up.
Here's a look at this week's big board. Conference play in full swing all around. But let's start things off in the top right corner. Look at Illinois and Penn State. Prime time matchup on NBC. Top 20 battle. We mentioned earlier in the show, Ross, the last time they met, also Penn State was ranked in the top 10. That one went to 9 overtimes before Illinois got the win. What are you most looking forward to in that matchup?
Well, hopefully we don't have 9 overtimes. I don't think I have it in me, especially lately. To 9 times. This should be a blast, right? Altmaier, Drew Aller, 2 teams that really lean right on protecting the football and have done a really good job of that. Lean on a hard charging kind of running game built on really good defense. This strikes me, Anthony, as a game that could be one of those 17-13, 13-10 final scores. You got Jalen Reed, Penn State, playing just about as well as anybody defensively in the country. Xavier Scott for Illinois, 2 guys, 2 of the best DBs in the country on the field, hard-hitting, smart players. Will be fun to watch the strategy, Anthony, on how the offenses, right, will defend against 2 really solid defenses and backfields.
And we've seen both offensive coordinators, both Andy Kotelnicki, both Barry Lennon Jr. Each guy has been willing to call his quarterback into aggression in big games that they've each faced so far, in hostile environments as well. So I do think we'll see offenses willing to go for it, but you do have, to Ross's point, 2 opposing defenses that have shown a knack for taking the football away, that have shown a knack for harassing the quarterback on the other side of the line of scrimmage. And so, when you have that aggression as an OC, how do you balance that? How do you temper that, especially in situations where you can make a case this will be the best opposing defense that maybe they've each faced? Now, the Illini facing that defense from Nebraska, they were able to have big success in the second half there, not only with the pass, but they were stubborn with that run game and got Caden Fagan going late. So I do wonder, what will be that balance? You got 2 QBs who've played at a high level so far this season, but which sort of offhand, which run game will be what sort of pushes things forward?
Speaking of aggression, to the Indiana Hoosiers we go.
Yes.
They have Maryland. I will be off there this weekend. Tailgate will be on site in Bloomington. Get you ready for that matchup. Indiana and Maryland. And Ross, if the Hoosiers win, they'll be 5-0 for the first time since 1967, which was the last time they made it to the Rose Bowl.
Wow, incredible. Who's going to stop Indiana's offense, right? We really haven't seen anybody, certainly hadn't seen anybody stop it. I'm not sure anyone has really slowed Indiana's offense. Now it's Maryland's turn, obviously. Good luck to Brian Williams, Maryland defensive coordinator, has his work cut out for him. Signetti's got his team playing incredibly well. Like we mentioned it earlier, Curtis Rourke, the transfer at quarterback. But one thing we've seen from the Terps is their ability to force turnovers. So we talked about it earlier today with another team, but the Terps, the key stat here is they're one of the leaders, right, in the country with 10 takeaways. So they continue to do that. Can they pressure Curtis Rourke enough and get him to throw maybe some picks under pressure? That's going to be the key probably in this game.
It's been a focal point for Brian Williams, Maryland's defensive coordinator, to try to get more heat from that front line, from the down 3 and down 4 without needing to blitz. But he still doesn't mind heating you up with additional pressure coming from the second and third level as well. But it's the quarterback play for me. I got to say, between the way Billy Edwards has been playing and Curtis Rourke has been playing, what you get from the quarterback position between two really active defenses. I mean, Bryant Haynes leading that Hoosiers defense, they've been really active, fun, aggressive in their style also. So it very much suits the way Indiana's offense has been operating so far, too. It's going to be a lot to look forward to.
It's going to be a fun vibe, too. That fan base thirsty for a winner, like a game that really matters. It's going to be fun. All right, for Ross and Anthony, I'm Mike. Thanks for watching this edition of Big Ten Today.